Welcome to Tweet This, a business owner's introduction to Twitter. My name is Lorraine Ball, and I'm going to be your host in today's conversation. I own a company called Roundpeg. We are a digital agency, and we work with businesses looking to improve their digital activity. We look at all social media and content marketing, and that includes Twitter, which is the subject of today's conversation. So, welcome to Twitter. It's hard to believe that just a decade ago, Twitter was started. I want to take a quick look at the history. We're not going to go year by year, but just a nice overview to give you a sense of how this platform has changed throughout the years. In 2006, Twitter was introduced as what was known as a one-to-many SMS tool. So what does that mean? That means that from one account, you could actually send a text message to multiple people. It was originally created as an internal tool for one company, and once they realized how productive it was, they expanded that and made it publicly available. They spun off Twitter to its own entity. And there you can see in March of 2006, the very first Twitter. And it was 140 characters because that was the length of the average, that was the length of a text message back then. But over the years, there have been a lot of changes, and the real launch of Twitter actually occurred in 2007 at South by Southwest. They had an opportunity to really show off what this tool could do as a way of helping people communicate with each other in real time. And it became very much about, what are you doing right now? That year, the hashtag was also introduced. This actually was something that people who were used to using a tool like Barcamp were quite familiar with. You would use a hashtag to cluster messages together. And Chris Messina, who was one of the engineers at Twitter, suggested people use it, and it caught on. And later in the program, I'm going to talk about some do's and don'ts for good hashtag behavior. There was a lot of growth over the next few years, and for those of us that have been active in Twitter since 2007 or 8, many of us are familiar with the fail whale. We put a lot of pressure on the system, and it quite honestly couldn't keep up for a number of years. It does now. Today, Twitter handles high volume of interactions. Also around that time, we started to see Twitter go mainstream, where in the beginning it was very much about techie nerds talking to each other. But suddenly celebrities were getting into the game, and even astronauts. You saw this tweet from astronaut T.J. Creamer from the space station. And then we started to see this. We started to see follow buttons popping up, not just in social media, but in all sorts of marketing. Suddenly, people were encouraging their fans and friends to follow them. And this is really where Twitter became a terrific marketing tool for businesses, because you could invite people to follow you, to stay in touch and keep up with what was happening in your business. We also saw a change from very much a text-only platform to a text and pictures platform. This is what the timeline looks like today. And as you can see, almost every tweet in my timeline has got some kind of picture or graphic attached. And that's one of the really important things that I want you to take away from today's conversation, is that if you're going to play on Twitter, you really need to be thinking about graphics and images. There were a lot of other changes. One was the discontinuing the favorite and switching to more of a like button. This was Twitter's attempt to be more like Facebook. And actually, I don't really love the like button. because in Twitter, you used to have to make a decision. I could favorite something, and that meant I was saving it to go back to it later, or if I liked the content, I retweeted it. The like button is actually very passive. I can like something, it makes the person who posted the content feel good, but nobody else knows I liked it. Nobody else sees that. And so that actually took away some of the real power and social sharing of Twitter. And so I would really recommend that, both from the perspective of you as a business owner encouraging people to engage with you, encourage them to retweet, not like, and you should do the same thing. The like is kind of a nice way to say hello, but it really doesn't create social interaction. The other thing that happened recently is the timeline used to always be chronological, with the newest stuff on top. But unless you adjust your news feed, we're now seeing more of the recommended, with the top tweets floating to the top of the timeline. Well, that hurts companies that aren't getting interaction. So number one, you can adjust your timeline so you always see the best, not the best, but the latest content. But also it puts more pressure on you to have interaction on your status updates if you want people to see what you're sharing. Also, that 140 character limit really began to constrain people. And so Twitter found ways to take photos, videos, and even your personal handle out of that 140 character limit. And that allowed people to send slightly longer messages. And the other thing that happened was the @reply, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, became public. It used to be if you said something and I replied just to you, you and I were the only two people who saw that message. So it took the one-to-many down to a one-to-one conversation. That's no longer the case, and now if I reply to something that you say, it's going to be in the public timeline. And just recently, in the last year, they went from 140 characters to 280 characters. And this particular graphic made me laugh because what they were saying was, instead of having me in 140 characters, you now could talk about yourself for 280. And there are a lot of people who totally have done this. But I really want to encourage you, if you're looking to use Twitter for your business or for networking, that you don't do this. That it isn't 140 or 280 characters about you, but it is conversation and it is interaction with others. Personally, I still try to keep my messages at that 140 character limit. It really flows better. People are more likely to read those short messages. But sometimes I really do appreciate a few extra characters. So what is Twitter good for? What should you be doing? What can you be doing with Twitter? And actually, there's a lot of very different things you can do. Look for news, networking, research, and even marketing your business. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how it's used for each of these. The first, and this I thought was pretty interesting, it was a survey of what people were using Twitter for and what kind of information was most likely to generate traffic to websites. And news topped the list. And that's because Twitter is ideally constructed for breaking news. And I would argue that it is probably CNN's biggest competition, because suddenly anywhere that news is happening, anywhere that a story is breaking, you don't have to wait for the reporters to show up or the photographers to get there or the camera crews. The minute something starts to happen and people whip out their phones, news is being recorded. The other thing is that it is news from the people's view. When I was growing up, way back in the pre-dawn, prehistoric era, The nightly news was edited and curated, and you got your view of the world based on what Chet Huntley or David Brinkley thought was important for you to see. But today, when everyone has a camera in their hand, there are an unlimited number of perspectives on an event. And so news today is much more of an uncurated news from the people's view. And if you really want a sense of that, search a trending topic on Twitter and really see what everyone is talking about with regard to a particular issue. This data point was from, I think, a year ago, and there are literally about 1,200 tweets per minute just on one topic. These were the results for the phrase tsunami. Oh, I take it back. This is more than a few years ago. This was when there was the tsunami that hit Japan, and my son actually happened to be stationed in Japan at the time, and so I was definitely paying attention to this, and there were 1,200 tweets per minute as that story was unfolding. Links to video, links to photographs, links to conversations, people sharing information, and this was one of the first times that we really saw how good Twitter was in emergencies. This was January 2009, and I always love to share this story to really point out how amazing a news source Twitter is. This photograph has been used and used and used over and over again, and it was taken by a professional photographer who happened to be out along the Hudson River the day the plane landed in the river. He actually had one of the very first photos of that plane in the water. He was there long before any news crews were, and he was sharing his photographs on Twitter. I actually saw one of the images, and I called my brother, who has an apartment that faces the Hudson River. And I asked him about the airplane in the water, and he basically said, "What are you talking about?" To which I replied, now remember, I live in Indiana, my brother lives in New Jersey. I said, "Go look out your window and call me back." And he called me back and said, "How did you know?" And I said, "Because I'm on Twitter." And anyone who was on Twitter actually saw this long before anyone could see information on television news or radio stations or any other kind of news source. And it continues today. Back in 2009, now it is almost an interactive news source. Here you've got actually some conversations with the governor of Puerto Rico, between the president and the governor of Puerto Rico, and here's the article, here's the comment, here's interactions back and forth. Beyond news, Twitter is a great way to share messages across communities. One of the most powerful examples of this was the Arab Spring in 2011, when literally people all over Egypt were able to interact on Twitter using hashtags, plan demonstrations, share information, and this eventually led to President Mubarak of Egypt actually stepping down. So creating a platform where people in very disjointed areas could communicate in real time as things were happening was an extremely powerful force in changing a political environment. I'm going to try to, I should have set this up earlier. I'm going to skip that one for right now. Twitter is actually still an SMS. It is still a great one-to-many messaging tool. Every Saturday morning, I put up a note and I tag a number of my friends and say, hey, you want to go for a walk? Saturday, 10 a.m. And you can see the string of conversation between different people who all see the messages. And every Saturday we plan where we're going to meet, when we're going to meet, how long we're going to walk. And the reason that we do this on Twitter rather than in a closed group or a private text message is every now and then another one of my friends sees the message and says, hey, can I come too? And it has been a nice way to continue to expand the group of people who walk with us. Twitter is also a tremendous resource tool for research. This is actually from a presentation that I saw on using Twitter for academics. It is a great way for people, again, around the world to connect, to look for peers, to search for other people who are doing research on the same topics, to collaborate on projects. This is really what the internet was originally about. If you go back to like the 1980s, long before the average person had internet connectivity in their home or their office, universities were connected. And the reason it was so important was it allowed scientists and researchers all over the world to connect and share information. Twitter just takes that relationship one step further. But it's not just for scientists. Really, the search tool in Twitter is so good that anyone can do this. You can look at keywords that are relevant for you or for your customers, and you can do a quick search in the Twitter toolbar. You'll get a list of the top tweets. You'll get a list of the latest posts on that topic. You'll get links to people who are talking about that, photos, videos, news, and broadcasts. You'll get suggestions of who to follow because these are people that are talking about this topic that you are interested in. You'll see related articles. You can do this with any word or any phrase. When we started working a number of years ago, it's probably 7 or 8 now, for a company that was doing cloud computing. Today, cloud computing is very common. Everybody does it. Everybody knows what it is. But back then, it was really not something that the average person understood. And so we wanted to connect with other people that were writing about and selling and cloud computing services, that were researching it. And we found that connecting on Twitter was a great way to build that network and build that community. Getting ready for this particular presentation, I actually put a question out on Twitter, and I asked a number, well, I just kind of threw it out there in general and said, hey, I'm working on a presentation on Twitter. Does anybody have a quick tip for me? And I got a number of people that interacted with me, that responded and gave me some good ideas and some insight that I could incorporate into this presentation. Twitter is also about marketing, and this is where it goes from being a networking tool. If you are looking to make connections for your business, if you're looking to do research, and now you can also think about Twitter as more of an outbound messaging tool. And this is why Twitter is so valuable. Twitter users are more likely to follow brands than email or Facebook. The likelihood of recommending a brand is much higher among Twitter followers than Facebook likers. And the likelihood of purchasing is, look at this, 37% versus 17%. People who are sharing news and information, actively using, voicing their opinions, conversing directly with the brand. That part is really small, but the part where they're voicing their brands and interacting and sharing your content is is fairly significant on Twitter. So having both a personal account and a business account. And don't post the same content to both, because then people are going to stop following either your personal or your company. There should be different voices. Your personal account is that. It is personal. So if you're going to get started on Twitter, you want to listen, learn, share, and chat. So join the conversation. It's easy to set up a Twitter account. Basically, an email address will get you started. Just a few short notes about setting up your cover image in your avatar. On Twitter, unless somebody goes to your page, they don't really see your cover image. And so whether it's a personal or a company image, this is really kind of wallpaper. The most important thing on this page is, number one, your photo. Why? Because this little avatar is what appears next to every update. You want it to be something that is recognizable as you, even in that very small space, either on the website or on someone's phone. And the other thing that's really important is this bio, because this is what someone will read to decide whether or not they're going to follow you. If you don't make it interesting, you reduce the chances that anyone will follow you. You can edit your profile very easily. Little edit button, and suddenly you have a screen. You can change your header photo, you can change your profile, you can write your bio. And in this bio, you can have hyperlinks. You can link to a website. You can have your location if you choose, and save your changes. If you're doing this for your business, make sure that whatever you put in your avatar circle is going to look good in really small font. If you look at my company logo, Roundpeg, you can see it's a pretty long horizontal logo. And let's face it, if I try to get it into this circle, it's going to shrink down pretty small and nobody is going to be able to read it. That's why we came up with this RP that we use consistently on all our social media. And our background image, it's just a texture, because very few people will ever come to this page. We might from time to time when we're running a class or a promotion put some text here, but I don't really count on this for any serious marketing, because very few people come to your timeline once they follow you. How they experience you is right here in the timeline. If you don't follow enough people, Twitter is definitely a lot like watching paint dry. The timeline doesn't move, it doesn't change. So you want to get out there and you want to follow people. You want to look for topics that you're interested in. Search keywords or phrases and see who pops up. Follow people you know and follow interesting people. Follow brands. Follow your competitors. Follow companies that are in related industries. And as you start to follow a lot of people, suddenly there's a lot of noise in your timeline, and sometimes it's harder to focus. You can actually build a list in Twitter around a specific interest. I have a list of local companies. So when I want to know what's going on in Indianapolis, I can just jump over to my local indie list. When I want to focus on what's happening in my industry, I have a digital mastermind list. I have a politics list. Please don't ask me why. I'm not sure that I really need to keep that list. I think sometimes it raises my blood pressure, but I have that as well. The other thing that you can do if you do not want to create permanent lists is you can look for hashtags to find communities. You can search pound heating and air conditioning, pound cloud computing, pound social media, and find a lot of people who are talking about that topic right now. In 2012, that was the first time I did this. On election night, I did pound election. And it was so interesting because in real time, I was watching conversations and comments from all over the world. I couldn't even refresh my screen fast enough to keep up with all the conversations. A little bit of vocabulary. First, your tweet, it's a status update. You have 280 characters maximum. Don't necessarily feel like you have to use all your words. And you can use text, you can use images, you can use GIFs and links. Couple of different terms when it comes to interaction. A mention is when you include someone in the conversation. For example, was reading a great book by @Mary Smith. Saw a presentation by Bobby Jones. Was thinking this looked like fun. What do you think? Peter Jones @Mary Smith. A retweet is when you share content that's created by someone else. There are two kinds of retweets, with or without additional content. The retweet without additional content is a little lazy. It does show up on your timeline and people will know that you're sharing content from others. But if you really want people to follow you and not just go and follow the other person, you need to add value. You need to tell people, why are you sharing this information? Why do you think it's worth putting in your timeline? A reply is when someone says something and you go back directly to them, but you want the reply to be public. A direct message is not visible to anyone except the person that you are specifically talking to. This is particularly helpful, and I'll show you in customer service. And a like is a like. You click the little heart. It doesn't go anywhere else, but it makes people feel good. Some basic rules and some best practices. What to share. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, what am I going to put on Twitter? You're telling me I need to have a minimum of 5 tweets a day. Oh my God, what am I going to say? Think about all the things that are happening in your business. Company updates and news. Ask questions to generate conversations. Twitter is a great way to do a little bit of quick hit surveying. If you had a choice between a pink cupcake and a blue cupcake, what flavor would you like? Share links to blog posts and upcoming events. Share behind the scenes information or how-to tips. And then share content from industry experts. You don't have to create, and you really shouldn't create everything that you share. It should be a mixture of things that you are creating and things that you find interesting. Again, you can have text, image, video. You can even do live video right in the timeline, as long as you stick to the 280 character limit. When you're thinking about your content mix and you're thinking about what you should be sharing, this ratio is really helpful to have in mind. About 50% of your content should really be designed to get likes and shares and comments. It should be entertaining and designed to invite conversation. So ask questions and share engaging images and video. About 30% should be useful information. Industry info, hints and tips, maybe some curated content. And then about 20% can be about your business specifically, direct calls to action. If the only thing you put in your timeline is buy now, buy now, buy now, register now, read this, people are going to get kind of tired. But if that information is kind of mixed in with everything else, you earn the right to present the direct action information. Show off the lighter side of your business. Twitter is a wonderful place to have a little bit of personality. At Roundpeg, we are well known for our food and eating trips. And so we share photographs of birthday celebrations and what we ate at the birthday celebration. And you notice that we tagged Sherilyn. So not only do people notice Roundpeg, they're likely to wish Sherilyn directly a happy birthday. So it builds a following for an individual employee as well. We certainly love to talk about our cats, and we have a lot of fun sharing their adventures on Twitter. And sometimes it's fun to share something that is just a little confusing. This was actually we created a LinkedIn profile for Benny, the Roundpeg office cat. And when we did, LinkedIn found him a job, and it was a job with a company called Rebel Mouse. We just thought this was funny. We shared it, and it got tremendous back and forth and positive interaction. How much content? A minimum of 5 times a day. And you should be mixing scheduled content within the moment. You can have 3, 4, 5 scheduled tweets that just appear in the timeline, and you can do that using something like Hootsuite or Buffer or TweetDeck, and that allows you to step away a little bit, but you have to mix in live content too. You have to periodically get in and interact with people. If you don't have the in-the-moment live content, your feed seems stale. But if you mix in back and forth live content and scheduled content, again, people are more likely to interact with you. How much is too much? There really is no maximum. When I go to a conference, if I'm doing a presentation, I might have a tweet scheduled every 5 minutes that links to my presentation. If I'm listening to a speaker that I really enjoy, I might be retweeting a lot of their content in real time. At other times, I might have a couple of tweets during the whole day. Same thing for a person or a company. But you've got to be there a minimum of a few times a day, because everybody jumps in and out of Twitter. If you only tweet once a day, most people will miss you. I thought this was interesting. This was from a HubSpot report looking at some of the best times to be on Twitter. For B2B marketers, we typically see, and this is not surprising, more interaction with our brand on weekends. Consumers see the highest engagement and click-through rates on weekends and Wednesdays. And these users are 181% more likely to be on Twitter during their commute. That's only if they're riding buses and trains. Clearly, that's not the case if they're driving. And then this statistic I thought was interesting as well. At lunchtime, you get a lot of CTR, click-through rate, where people see something and they click through to read the article. But 5 in the afternoon is going to give you the highest retweet. People will see things and just reshare them, but they may not actually click through themselves. I showed you earlier, I wanted to reinforce it. Twitter is visual, but it doesn't mean that it has to be just pictures. You can do a picture, or you can do something like this that is a social share. Now, you're probably thinking, Lorraine, that's all great, but I don't have a graphic designer that's working for me. How do I create something that looks like that? I'm going to let you in on a secret. You can go into PowerPoint. You can create a PowerPoint slide and save it as a JPEG, and it will be perfectly sized for Twitter. You can also use programs like Paint and Canva, but honestly, most businesses know how to use PowerPoint, and I would definitely make the most of it. And when you are creating blog posts that you think you might share on social media, make sure that the blog post has a featured image as well. So when you share the link, you get the image in the timeline. This is a really cool strategy. Lots of people share links on Twitter, and mostly they are ignored. This strategy of sharing a link and asking a question kind of changes the whole dynamic. This one in particular, how long would you need to save to buy a house in these cities? That's kind of just teasing this, but if you did this question more like, which of these cities would you like to live in, you'd get more interaction. Or a question maybe about, what's the average price of a home in your area? How much do you have to save? So the article has got good information, but the question also generates conversation. If you're going to be on Twitter, and really this is true for Twitter, for social media, for long-form blogging, for everything that you write, you need to find your voice. You need to decide who you're talking to and what you want that to sound like. At Roundpeg, we decided that when I split my personal and the company accounts, I wanted Roundpeg to sound like me on my very best days. That doesn't mean my most professional. Roundpeg is actually snarky but never mean. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Lots of good information, but with a very light touch. Making those conscious decisions about what your voice is about will actually allow you to create better content. One of my favorite examples of really good voice is Sue the T-Rex. She is the voice, if you will, of the Field Museum in Chicago. They were on a mission a number of years ago to attract people to the museum, attract younger people to the museum. And this was actually a St. Patty's Day tweet. Hey, the Field Museum is open later today. Museums are usually quiet with lots of water fountains, so a good place to walk off. Yesterday's fun. They were reaching out directly to a younger consumer group that probably went out and partied just a little bit too heavy in preparation for St. Patty's Day. She is always fun and informative and very much on voice. Never takes herself too seriously. There is a Field Museum account that has a more professional business voice. This is really more their marketing and promotion. And once you find your voice, you want to make sure that you don't lose it. Scotty's Brewhouse, when they first started, had a very flip and fun account. It was very interactive. And one day I noticed that it looked a lot more like this. We're open at 11. Get these great drinks. Get pizza. Breaking out the grill. Each of these tweets is fine, and none of them has any personality. When I saw that, I knew that they had a different person managing their social media. Don't let that happen to you. Don't lose your voice if you have a new person taking over your Twitter account. Make sure you have some rules and some guidelines in place to remind you or to keep someone else on track. Twitter is about humor in the moment. It is about responding in real time to things. This, I thought, was a wonderful example of brands interacting. Oreo Cookie put up a tweet and said, "Ever bring your own Oreo cookies to the movie theater?" To which AMC Movie responded, "Not cool, Cookie." I laughed when I saw this. Clearly, AMC had a search set up to find the word theater anytime it appeared in a tweet, and for them to very quickly respond. Look at the interaction. Oreo Cookie only had, well, 58 retweets is still pretty good, 26 likes. Look at what happened on the retweets and conversations. I mentioned the hashtag earlier. This is a keyword. You can use it for conferences and events, breaking news, or anytime you want to see a string of replies. Basically, a hashtag will bundle any tweets that contain that same phrase. If you are going to create a hashtag, maybe you're promoting an event and you want it to be the Summer Theater Party Opening 2018. That's too long. Why? You only have 280 characters. You don't want too many tied up just with your hashtag. People won't have any room to talk. Keep it short. Also, 1 to 2 hashtags per tweet. Every now and then you see someone that does pound Indy, pound Indianapolis, pound Indiana, pound summer fun. No, pick one and be a part of that conversation. And also use title case when you're creating your hashtags. So make every word start with a capital letter. Why? It makes it easier to read the hashtag and get the meaning. And interact with people. Again, you're going to put up a lot of your own content, but interact. Ask your customers to testify, basically to create testimonials on Twitter. Are you a longtime fan? Share a story. And if people interact with you, remember to thank, retweet, and like the comments. People participate on social media. To some extent, it's about ego when they do. And so when they are noticed, it feeds their ego and they are more likely to participate in a conversation next time. Also, if I see that you interact with people who share content about you, I'm more likely to interact as well. Look for relevant conversations. Search hashtags, keywords, and join the conversation. Twitter is a lot like a very friendly cocktail party. It's not one of those cliquey parties where everybody is talking in little tight circles and you can't join. It's a very open party where there are a group of people that are talking and you can simply jump into the conversation. Reply to people, use the same hashtags, add value to the conversation, and people will interact with you, whether you are a brand or a person. Specifically and proactively reach out and talk to people. Keep a running list of people, maybe your customers, employees, people in the community, and periodically just jump over to their timeline. Find something they're talking about and share, remark, reply. This was a case where Carol is actually the owner of a social media company out on the West Coast, and she had been talking about Proposition 68. Now, living in Indianapolis, Proposition 68 isn't necessarily relevant to me, but I went ahead and commented and reshared and had a conversation with her about it. She is more likely, when I do something like that, to respond, reshare, or look for a piece of my content to interact with as well. And when you're hosting an event, I say a conference tool here, but really any event, create a hashtag prior to the event. Publicize that hashtag on all your conference literature, on your conference website, on your conference registration forms, and in the conference handout, so that as people are coming to the event and they are tweeting, they are likely to use the hashtag. In doing so, other people will see posts and updates about the event and will be more likely to interact. If you have the capability, a Twitter wall is a lot of fun at an event. Basically, all you need is a projector that's hooked up to Twitter. You search for the hashtag, and if people are using and interacting with you on the hashtag, everybody at the conference can see in real time what everyone else is saying, even if they're not necessarily on Twitter at that moment. If you are a speaker, create slides within your presentation that are what I call quotable, short, just maybe 1 or 2 lines of text. If you remember earlier in my presentation, I had a slide that said, if you don't follow enough people, Twitter is like watching paint dry. And there wasn't a lot else on that slide. That was designed to be a quotable slide. Someone can type that text or simply photograph my tweet and share that with the hashtag. People at the event and people who are not at the event are likely to see the conversation. Another trick as a speaker is to have scheduled content. Very often, if I know my presentation is going to be from 4 to 5 o'clock, I will actually take some of my slides and share them in the timeline as individual images. Remember, save as JPEG, and I will actually schedule them to appear in the timeline while I'm speaking. I use the hashtag so anyone in the audience can find that image and then share it, and they don't have to even do any of the work. Hashtags also allow you to interact with the speakers. Again, I was at a conference and this was so funny. The speaker said something, he made a comment about his wife being a doctor, and someone posted a comment, because it was a very lively, fun conference, wow, she married down, and he put the hashtag there. And so as the speaker is talking, he looks over and he sees that comment. And he sort of stopped and looked out at the audience and said, okay, who said that? And it was a very fun interaction. It was a very nice way to take a really stuffy event and really transform it into a very interactive event. Another way to really become a part of the community, really create some interaction, is to join a blog chat. And blog chats are reoccurring conversations that typically happen at the same time every week. And there is a hashtag. Here, the hashtag is DigiBlogChat. It is a series, it's a moderated question and answer session where somebody is hosting the chat, asking questions, and people are answering, and everything has the hashtag. It is a great way to connect with people that have similar interests. I've seen Twitter chats on political issues, social issues, business issues, also some very niche topics on social media and SEO. I would search, again, if you're searching for your industry and you're following people who are active, you're going to see these little chats in their timeline. Click on the chat, read the conversation, see if it's something you want to get connected with. Customer service. Again, whether you like it or not, people are going to turn to Twitter to talk about your business. So make sure that you are paying attention and getting notifications and using tools to respond. You need to respond quickly. And that does not mean you have to be very public in your response. One of the best strategies is, hey, I'm sorry this isn't working. Go ahead and DM me, and then take that conversation offline or out of the public view to resolve issues. Share helpful information. Maybe you've got frequently asked questions. Have someone on hand who can answer them. Have someone moderating and watching for these questions. Here's an example. DM me the phone number and I can look into it for you. So giving people a way to manage that conversation and to get their issues resolved. When someone complains, here you've got an epic fail. Go ahead and provide the information. If your company is large enough, having individual people put their initials at the end of the help personalizes it, because it lets people know there's a specific person who's answering the questions. And feel people's pain. Again, they're not promising anything other than, oh no, what happened? Go ahead and email us here. Let's get this taken care of. Solve problems with humor. Twitter is a very informal platform. This was Greg's, a bakery in the UK, complaining about Google UK. You know, these are yours if you fix it. Sorry, we're on it. Throw in a sausage roll. We'll get it done ASAP. Don't be afraid to have fun. Unless, I mean, you know, you have to kind of moderate. How annoyed is someone? Is it something that's wrong that you can fix? Be a human being. This one I love. This is a great example. Hey, Waterstones, I've been locked inside your store for 2 hours. Please let me out. We're pleased to announce he's a free man. Thanks for your concern and your tweets. Again, you've got to be paying attention 24/7. You have to have the notifications turned on. There are a lot of tools that you can use to streamline your Twitter interactions. Tools like Hootsuite, TweetDeck, and even Buffer allow you to schedule a lot of your content in advance. You can also manage your followers with tools like Manage Flitter and Who Unfollowed Me. And you can measure whether or not your Twitter influence is growing with tools like Clout or Twitter Grade. And measure your results. Hop over to your analytics and take a look. Are you going up or down in the last month? What was your top tweet? Which interactions got the, which mentions got the most interaction? What does your Twitter usage and impressions look like over time? And which content got the best results? Use this information to do a better job of creating new content. I'm happy to take questions. And of course, be sure to follow my company and follow me on Twitter.